Seattle, temporary home of the Polar Pioneer Mobile Drilling Unit, moored at Terminal 5 in the city's port. It's probably the most controversial oil rig anywhere in the world right now. The eyes of the world are on Puget Sound at the moment because it's here that Shell is preparing for what will be the world's most closely watched oil drilling campaign this year. Indeed, the wells that Shell plans to drill in the Arctic this summer will be some of the most closely scrutinised in history. If all goes to plan, in July the Polar Pioneer will be towed through the Bering Strait to the Chukchi Sea off the northwest coast of Alaska. There it'll drill into the Burger prospect, about 70 miles off the coast, in an area that could hold billions of barrels of oil.
As far as sequence, we get on location, run anchors, and then we'll drill an 8.5 pilot hole, and that's to check for permafrost or any shallow hazards. And then after we do that, then we will get ready to deploy the big bit.
The rig's being loaded up with everything it'll need for a summer drilling campaign that'll last only about a couple of months, constrained by Arctic ice and by limits imposed by regulators. This steel pipe, known as casing, will be used to line the well, which will sink about 7,000 feet below the seabed in 150 feet of water. The rig's also carrying a blowout preventer, the stack of valves that sits on the seabed intended to stop oil escaping, with a spare in case the first one fails. Anne Pickard, the Shell executive leading the project, says that while the drilling programme is bound to face unexpected obstacles, she can see no weaknesses in her plan. Environmental campaigners have not been reassured by Shell's precautions. In May, about 500 kayaktivists paddled out to surround the rig in canoes to protest against Shell's plans. They're concerned both about the risk of a spill and about the consequences for climate change of the continued production and use of oil for decades to come. Campaigners say the paddle in Seattle was a big success.
So we've been hugely successful in the fact that in 2012 Shell was able to essentially have their vessels throughout the Puget Sound and go up there unnoticed. And so the difference from 2012 to the reception that they've gotten this year just shows how much the folks here in the Pacific Northwest in fighting oil trains and coal exports have built this infrastructure of citizens who will stand up to any fossil fuel project no matter what it is.
Emily Johnston of 350 Seattle, a local environmental group, took part in the kayak protest. She says the campaigners will keep up the pressure on Shell and on the US administration. Shell hasn't helped its own case with a series of mishaps. A rig it used before the Polar Pioneer, the Kuluk, was being towed in heavy seas off the south coast of Alaska in December 2012 when it broke free of its tow cable and it ended up running aground. The boat that was towing the Kuluk at the time, the Ivik, will be used again by Shell this summer, part of the small armada of 29 vessels deployed for the project. Trying to ensure that the drilling campaign suffers no more serious accidents in an area where a spill could be disastrous means that oil development in the Arctic is a slow and expensive business. Shell's already spent $7 billion on preparing to drill. Even if all goes well and it finds a large oil field, it probably won't come into production until the 2030s. By spending billions in exploring the Arctic, Shell is betting that whatever happens to electric cars, whatever happens to biofuels, whatever happens to climate change and to policies to combat it, in 20 years' time and more, the world will still be thirsty for oil. History suggests they may well be right, but the company's present generation of leaders will be long gone before we know for sure. Ed Crooks for the Financial Times, Seattle.